I can't think of a witty hook or introduction. So we're going to just dive right back into First John chapter 2. We're in verse 15. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. That is a very strong statement. We talked last time about don't love the world or anything in the world. And when John, of course, used the word world, he was not meaning earth. He meant this whole system of the world we live in. Our emotional, relational, intellectual, spiritual, every level of our lives is within the context of the world. Now, we live in the world, but John says, don't love that world. I want to just come back to that and touch on it just for a moment. I think it's dangerous. It's tricky. Maybe that's a better word, because okay, I live here, and my relationships, my work, my various activities are really within the context of the world, but I'm not a citizen of the world, right? C.S. Lewis, I'm going to roughly paraphrase it, had a terrific statement. He said, if I find myself longing for something that this world cannot provide, is it not possible that there is something out there for which I have been created that cannot be fulfilled in this world? In other words, my home is not here. Lewis said, there's a lot of wonderful inns along the way, but don't mistake them for home. I get so wrapped around the axle of this world that I forget that when I was a little kid, we learned a chorus. If you grew up in the church, you probably learned it too. This world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. Well, yeah. Jesus, in his prayer for the disciples and us in John 17, never used the phrase, they are in the world but not of the world. But he emphasized they live here, but protect them because they are not made just for here. They're made for temporarily here and eternity. We live in a paradox. The paradox is time and space will inhibit us. It just does. And yet we were created for an existence where neither are binding. Well, okay. Do not love the world or anything in the world. We can't get too attached to our stuff. Much as I love some of my stuff, I don't ever want to become too attached to it. We used to do a little exercise way back in my youth ministry days. We'd ask kids to think about, okay, the house is on fire. What would you run back in and get? Well, if you really wanted to make it a difficult thing, so you can only bring one thing out. What one thing would you bring out? Oh, wow. Well, thankfully, and I hope and pray, we aren't going to have to literally make that choice. But some of us, it'd be so challenging for us to be able to think of what is the one thing. We got a dozen things. Here again, there's a principle. Don't get married to this world and the stuff in this world, because first of all, remember when we were in First and Second Peter, especially Second Peter, there's no mystery. Peter says it's going to burn. It's going away. It cannot last. So don't become too attached. Be attached in a way that permits you to steward it, but don't be so attached that it becomes a part of you. Well, okay. This is the hard part. The strongest part of the statement. Okay. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. Here is probably the bottom line. We cannot have divided love and loyalty. You can't. Jesus said no man can serve two masters. Well, he was talking specifically in that case about money, which is one of the things of this world. He said either you're going to love the one or you'll hate the other, but you cannot serve both. Here's the thing. If I love the world, if my affection for the world, my attachments are all taken up with the world, there's nothing left for the Father. We don't like it that way. What we want is, but can't we share? Isn't it possible for, I love God, of course I love God, but I also love other things. Apparently not. In principle, for me, what John is saying is kind of a rephrasing of what Jesus said. If I love anything as much as I love God, I can't really be loving God. God has to be the supreme. Jesus said, if you love your father or your mother or your family more than me, you can't be my follower. He said it in even stronger terms. To follow me, you have to hate your mother and your brother. And what? Well, here's the thing. If God is not the center, the hub, if God is not the supreme authority and affection in my life, he is out of his rightful place. And so I can believe about myself that I love God when he's out here on the perimeter. He's a part of my life. I always want God to be a part of my life. I've heard people say this in various ways, and almost always I want to go, wait, stop. It doesn't work that way. John says God can't be a part of your life. God has to be your life. Okay. Verse 16, for everything in the world, and then now he's going to expand on that. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. All right. Let's unpack that. For everything in the world, and then he lists three things, and two of those he puts in the category of lust. Now, lust, for most church people, has been relegated to one context: sex. Lust means dirty thoughts, and dirty thoughts really are a product of lust. But lust, the real definition of lust is desire out of context. Desire pushed beyond its legitimate value. As anything that can be strong or valid or valuable within its proper context, when it's pushed outside of that, becomes an evil. It becomes a weakness. That's what lust is. When any desire is pushed beyond its appropriate, and for us as believers, for any of us whose desire is pushed outside of what God has declared as his design, his will, that's lust. So can we, well, look, there's several things. First of all, he says lust of the flesh. Well, yeah. I, I believe now we're talking about this pornographic lust that is so prevalent in the world today. It's just when I was younger, I thought old people made way too much of this. Now I'm older and I'm thinking, no, they were probably about right. Everywhere, not everywhere, but boy, so many of the places you look for in terms of advertising. Have you ever seen an ugly person try to sell you a new car on TV? Or, oh, here's my favorite, or, my favorite one to poke at, the fragrances. There is no ugly person promoting all of these fragrances and parfums, right? I mean, and here's the other thing. There's nobody who keeps their clothes on that's doing that. It's great. Why? Well, it's because as human beings, God created us with the capability of being attracted visually. Now, these are men primarily who are visually attracted. Women, I still am a firm believer in this dichotomy that men are attracted more by visual images, women are attracted more by emotional environments and emotional messaging. And so you can make anything out of that. But if you apply that, you realize a whole lot of things that are on TV as advertisements for stuff appeal to the lust of the flesh. Now, this pornographic kind of lust is not the only thing. I think anytime our interest and desire, again, is exploded or expanded beyond its legitimate limit, that becomes lust. Lust is desire out of control. You have the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eye. Now, you put those two together, and you get most of the new car advertisements, right? A beautiful, usually a beautiful female, behind the driver's seat or leaning against, or you remember, you have to be old to remember this, but when the Mercury Cougar came out, Farrah Fawcett Majors was the first blonde bombshell image that they created their ad with, right? She was right there against the fender of the Cougar. And eventually what the advertisers realized was nobody could remember the car, but nobody could forget Farrah Fawcett Majors. I mean, this was even before Charlie's Angels. Okay, boy, you connect the lust of the flesh with the lust of the eyes. See, the lust of the eyes is, ooh, I must have that. And one of the big triggers for the lust of the eye is, I would feel better about me if I had that. Most of the acquisition that we do, needless accumulation, acquiring of stuff, amounts to, I thought that would make my life better, cooler, more meaningful, the lust of the eye. And then the third thing is the pride of life. Pride. All right, there's several different aspects of pride, and in the last few seconds, I'm just going to point out the pride that I think John is talking about here is not the fulfillment or the satisfaction that comes from a job well done or participating in some kind of endeavor that succeeds. The pride he's talking about here is best described as a preoccupation with self. The pride of life says, I'm the center of the universe. It's very narcissistic in nature. It's me. It's about me. It's you. Can't you see? All of this is a pretty negative picture of what life can be. No, let me rephrase that. All of this is a very negative picture of what life can be if we let it. We'll have to come back to it because we're not done, believe it or not. Coming back to it next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.